Hi everyone. I know I'm like a month late here, but the legendary, or infamous, depending on who you ask, Gary Yourofsky is back in action after an 8-year hiatus from animal rights activism. I didn't think I'd make a video about this, as Natalie Fulton covered the controversy of his return so well on her channel. But then he made an appearance on Jamie Logan's podcast, which caused a bit of a stir on Instagram, with Jamie doubling down on her decision to platform him. And I have some thoughts. I won't just be repeating what Natalie said, so if you haven't seen her video, be sure to go watch it. As for Jamie Logan, I like Jamie and think she does great work. I'm actually a bit envious of her job. Like, where can I apply to be a traveling yoga teacher / model / animal rights activist? I mean, I'm fairly qualified. I have a 200-hour yoga teacher certification and a lot of experience doing animal rights activism. I might have to take some public speaking and modeling classes, but I am a learner. Please hire me. Anyway, as much as I like Jamie, the power of Christ compels me to respond to her podcast episode with Gary, and her subsequent live stream response to the backlash she received.
After these past few days, since I've released the episode with Gary, I'm seeing how divisive our movement is and how people are so quick to get on their keyboards and make assumptions about myself, about Gary, about other people, and to spread more hate as opposed to perhaps expressing their opinion in a way that's respectful. I'm totally open to critique and hearing various sides. I mean, absolutely. That's, in my opinion, how progress gets made. But to stand there and call names and to spread more hate, I don't think gets us any closer to the peaceful world that we all want.
We have a responsibility to be mindful with our words and actions,
right,
and reflect and completely see from the point of view that we're seeing, the beginning of it, of what we're thinking and feeling, and see it through to every case scenario of how it will affect somebody else.
Yeah. And I think that Gary should follow that advice for sure. I don't agree with everything that he has said, but I can recognize his impact for the animals. And I think that a lot of what I'm seeing is clips of him being taken out of context and clips where people then use it to just continue to push their own agenda and their own narrative. And then they have the audacity to come at me and call me names. And I mean, suddenly people are saying that I'm okay with hurting people and bombs, and I'm like, you don't even know me. Like, we've never even met, and how dare you like say that when you don't know at all what I stand for. If anybody who knows me knows I'm a yogi. I literally am like all about peace. That is all I want. That's why I'm vegan. And to be clear, anybody who's listening, I believe in liberation for all. I want love and peace for all beings. I think Gary cares too. And
Absolutely.
But after speaking with him for an hour about these things, so most of these people that are commenting didn't even listen to the podcast. So I will ignore some of what's going on because they didn't even listen to the podcast. And instead they just take 30-second social media clips and make their assumptions about people, and they engage in online bullying and name calling. Exactly what we're talking about not doing. But because I spoke to him for an hour, he is not saying he doesn't care about human rights. He is not saying that humans shouldn't have rights. I mean, absolutely not. Obviously, he wants peace. He is just saying that he chooses to focus on the animal rights. One, because a lot of human rights activists, number one, aren't even vegan. Right. They eat and wear leather at their demonstrations. And if we were to ask them to bring animal rights related topics into their conversations, it would be laughed at.
Exactly.
It would be like offensive.
And here's the thing, to be clear, neither Jamie or I will support a racist.
No.
Of course. And that's not what we're talking about here. Okay? Because I have not read that thing, and because I haven't read it, I don't want to speak about it. I don't want to do hearsay. And
yeah, and by the way, Gary's sentiments on my podcast, anybody who actually listened to it, there's no hate or racism. Like, he didn't say anything that was hateful, misogynistic, racist. It didn't even go there. So it's like you're taking comments from maybe stuff that I haven't even seen and like making assumptions. And I don't know. I think that it's one thing to disagree with somebody's opinions, but it's another thing to like make assumptions about their character. And I can't tell you how many people have been calling me names on here. So it kind of makes me think like, well, you just go around calling everybody racist.
That's right.
Anybody that is saying that, Jaime, why don't you recognize some of Gary's statements as hateful? I do recognize some of them, and I don't agree with everything that Gary says. What Gary says doesn't mean that I also say it too, okay? And if you listen to my podcast with him, you will see that there was no mention of any hateful comments. It was a very respectful conversation, and it was focused on the animals. I platform Gary Yourofsky because, in my opinion, he has been one of the most effective activists of our time, and nothing of what he said on my platform was hateful, was
racist,
was I mean, you listened to the podcast,
yeah.
Alex. My podcast was a chance for him to kind of try to explain himself. Like, why did he say fuck human rights? Why did he say that? And from what I gathered after speaking to him for an hour, by the way, the fuck human rights thing didn't come out till after I interviewed him, by the way. But from what I understood after speaking to him for an hour is he wasn't saying fuck human rights in general. He was saying when we are talking about the animals and when we are focused on this one particular issue of animal rights, we'll get to the human rights. But let's start here. And he has a terrible way of saying it. It's stupid. It's not nice. I don't agree with it. That's not how I would phrase things or what I believe in. But he does. I mean, obviously, he used to fight. He was talking about on the podcast how he started off as a human rights activist. Actually, he was a civil rights activist, and so the guy believes in rights for living beings. He just, I mean, look, there's some people I don't know what to tell you why he says it like, and I think it was taken out of context from a hour-long interview he did, that one clip.
Context matters.
I recognize the positive impact both Gary and Jaime have made for the animals, but I think they're wrong about a few things, and I hope to express my opinion in a way that is fair and respectful. For reasons we'll get into, I think Gary is too far gone, but I don't think this is the case with Jaime. Maybe I'm wrong, but I believe her when she says she's open to hearing other sides. She complains about things being taken out of context, which is something I am very mindful of. If you've seen response videos of mine, you know I'm always playing long, uninterrupted clips, so the full context is there. And that's what I'll be doing here. Jaime says name-calling doesn't get us closer to the peaceful world we all want. Let's talk about this. I don't stand for name-calling in the form of insulting someone's appearance, punching down, or mischaracterizing someone's beliefs and intentions. To the people calling Jaime a white supremacist, that's quite a leap. Like, reel it in a little. Like Jaime said, when you go around calling everyone who doesn't pass the woke purity test a white supremacist, it makes people lose trust in your judgment. Don't be the boy who cried wolf. But I'm not going to take a principled stance against name-calling, because sometimes it is justified to use insulting or demeaning labels to describe people. For example, Matt Walsh is a fascist freak. J.K. Rowling is a deranged crybaby. Donald Trump is a supercalifragilisticexpialidocious racist sexist Nazi POTUS, if the shoe fits. Maligning someone's character is justified when they have expressly demonstrated poor character. And while I don't think Jaime has done this, I think Gary has. She says Gary obviously wants peace, but the peace Gary is advocating for is negative peace. Negative peace is the absence of tension, whereas positive peace is the presence of justice. Positive peace should be the goal. Anyone demanding negative peace is a hindrance to this goal, because, to quote Martin Luther King Jr., injustice must be exposed, with all the tension its exposure creates, to the light of human conscience and the air of national opinion before it can be cured. If you haven't read his letter from a Birmingham jail, the link's in the description. This is mandatory reading. Get with the program. Anyway, I choose to believe Jaime and her cousin when they say they wouldn't support a racist. But as I will show, they're missing some crucial context that I hope will have them rethink their adoration of Gary Yourofsky. So let's look at comments Gary has made in the past and present and determine whether the accusation that he is a racist is appropriate or a mischaracterization. As Natalie revealed in her video, in an email from 2025, Gary said that Israelis are 100% right, which confirms that his views have not changed since he posted this in 2015. As Israelis are in the process of destroying the meat, dairy, and egg industries, which will lead to the eradication of animal concentration camps, Palestinians and their psychotic human rights sympathizers are building more animal camps. While Israelis have made their land a haven for homosexuals, Palestinians ostracize, harm, and even murder gay people, as they consider homosexuality to be sinful. While Israelis, sans the ultra-Orthodox ones who comprise 1% to 2% of Israel and are as crazy as the Palestinians, allow women an equal say in society, Palestinians continue to oppress women in the same way all Arab nations do. While Israelis would love to live amongst the Palestinians and all other people, the Palestinians are hell-bent on destroying Jews, literally teaching hatred towards them in their schools, and refuse to live peacefully amongst the Jewish people. The Palestinians are the problem. They are the most psychotic group on this planet. Even the Arab nations who sympathize with them, Egypt, Jordan, etc., send those psychotic lunatics back after they catch them hiding out in their country. So don't be another mindless, bleeding heart liberal who blindly takes the side of Palestinians because they're the cause du jour. Furthermore, even though I am sympathetic towards human rights issues, gay rights, women's rights, etc., I will no longer fight for humans to be treated fairly/equally until those who are oppressed stop oppressing the animals. Until animals are included in the discussion, I say to hell with any oppressed two-legged creature who can't even realize the oppression they are actively supporting every time they eat a meal or buy a new pair of shoes. The animals got it the worst of all. Palestinians are living like kings and queens compared to the cows, chickens, pigs, turkeys, and sheep of the world. So focus on the issue at hand, animal liberation, and forget about those Palestinian maniacs. And technically, even under the loosest definition, Palestinians are not living in concentration camps. Go visit a cow slaughterhouse where these innocent beings are beheaded one after the other, or a dairy facility where cows are raped to impregnate them and machines are hooked up to their breasts several times a day. Or watch a slaughterhouse truck drive down the road with 1,000 chickens on board, headed to a building to be murdered. And then ask yourself, how in the hell did I get duped into believing that Palestinians are oppressed and living in concentration camps? Please wake up and focus on the only critical and important issue of our time. There is a lot wrong with this statement. First of all, this claim that Israel is a vegan haven is highly suspect. Again, Gary's views on this topic have not changed, as demonstrated in his conversation with Vegan Gains last month.
Israel was fabulous, Richard. I mean, it was amazing. They were coming out in droves to hear the message. I was selling out 500, 800 seat movie theaters. They were thirsting for this. And the media reported that I converted anywhere from 5 to maybe 10% of their population. It was crazy and it was wonderful. The most vegan friendly place on this planet right now.
Yeah, I know the IDF, they have to give vegan meals to all their soldiers and everything now. It's great.
People should support Israel just for that
Yeah.
alone. The most vegan friendly place on the planet, and people want to condemn them?
Yeah.
Get out.
Yeah.
While many articles online report that 5% of Israelis are vegan, they all point to a single source, Some dude named Omri Paz, who runs an animal rights organization in Israel, said so. The media ran with it, despite having no data to back it up, publishing article after article with titles such as How Israel Became a Vegan Paradise and Israeli Veganism Takes Root in the Land of Milk and Honey, referring to Israel as the vegan capital of the world and the promised land for vegans. I spent an hour digging into this and came up with nothing. Some articles mention a study, but don't link to it, which is telling. Broadly speaking, this is referred to as whitewashing. Whitewashing is the act of minimizing or covering up vices, crimes, or scandals, or of exonerating the guilty by means of biased presentation of data, with the intention to improve someone's reputation. From the term whitewashing, more specific terms like greenwashing, pinkwashing, and vegan washing have emerged. Like pinkwashing, the portrayal of Israel as a safe haven for queer people, vegan washing is used in service of the same goal, to paint Israel as a beacon of progressive values, rather than a genocidal colonial apartheid state. Vegan washing is straight from the Nazi playbook. We often hear carnists claim that Hitler was a vegetarian. This myth arose from Nazi propaganda attempting to portray him as a compassionate person. Which is ironic because carnists are now flipping this tactic on its head, attempting to make themselves look more compassionate by associating vegetarianism with Hitler. Even if it were true that Hitler was a vegetarian, it wouldn't fucking matter. Exploiting animals is wrong regardless. Likewise, even if it were true that 5% of Israelis identify as vegan, it wouldn't change the fact that Israel is committing a genocide. Good behavior in one area doesn't absolve bad behavior in another. It would be interesting to see what percentage of Israeli vegans are pro-Palestine, as I would guess it is higher than the general Israeli populations at 19%. Sadly, there's no data on this. You know what we do have data on, though? Per capita meat consumption. Israel ranks number 8 in the world, and number 1 in chicken consumption. This paints a very different picture than the one Gary described. I'm not one to argue that conservative vegans, including Zionist vegans, shouldn't call themselves vegan. Sure, their beliefs are ideologically inconsistent, but we all hold contradictory viewpoints to some extent. Generally speaking, gatekeeping is harmful to social justice movements. But I don't care if you eat a vegan diet and wear vegan combat boots. If you are actively dropping bombs on children, you are by definition not a vegan. Some gatekeeping is necessary, otherwise words cease to have meaning. Veganism is the practice of abstaining from all forms of animal cruelty and exploitation. Humans are animals, so engaging in cruelty and exploitation of humans is being speciesist towards humans. But it's like, where do we draw the line? I talk about this in my video in defense of bad vegans. There's no hard line. It's the paradox of the heap. A single grain of sand is not a heap. If you add another grain of sand, it's still not a heap. Add another and another and another. When does it become a heap? There's no definitive answer. We just know a heap when we see one. Blatant cruelty, like murdering Palestinian civilians, disqualifies you from using the vegan label. I am not against defensive violence, and one could argue that sometimes what appears offensive is actually defensive. For example, Luigi Mangione was not acting defensively in the sense that Brian Thompson was coming at him with a weapon, but he was arguably acting defensively in the sense that the ruling class is waging a class war by perpetrating systemic violence against the working class. This is the same line of reasoning that the Israeli Defense Force uses. They claim that their offensive actions against the people of Gaza are actually defensive because the Palestinians started it, and they have a right to defend themselves. But this breaks down for 2 reasons. 1, the Palestinians didn't start it. Israel is a settler colonial apartheid state that has forced Palestinians to live in an open-air prison under a brutal occupation and is actively committing a genocide. If you don't believe me, read the book 10 Myths About Israel, and take it up with the UN, Human Rights Watch, Doctors Without Borders, Amnesty International, the International Federation for Human Rights, Euromed Monitor, Oxfam, Greenpeace, etc. And 2, bombing and starving civilians is not the same as targeting a specific high-profile individual who is a known offender. The CEO of United Healthcare was not an innocent civilian. You might catch me justifying the killing of ultra-wealthy, ultra-guilty individuals, the people at the top of these parasitic institutions, making decisions that cause the suffering and death of thousands, sometimes billions. Fossil fuel and animal ag executives, bring out the
I'm not saying somebody should. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying anyone should. No, I'm not. Couldn't be me. You know what I mean? But if someone was going, I'm kidding, don't. I'm completely joking. Nobody should. Nobody should. You shouldn't. I shouldn't. Nobody should. Nobody should. That's all I've got to say. That's all I have to say. Just nobody should. And I've said that no one should. Very publicly.
But you will never catch me justifying killing groups of people wholesale on the presumption that they are all guilty and irredeemable. This is referred to as collective punishment, a punishment or sanction imposed on a group or whole community for acts allegedly perpetrated by a member or some members of that group or area, which could be an ethnic or political group, or just the family, friends, and neighbors of the perpetrator, as well as entire cities and communities where the perpetrators allegedly committed the crime. Collective punishment is a war crime, as it violates international law established by the Geneva Conventions. I understand that many Palestinians hold oppressive views about women and gay people, but so do many Americans. I don't think we should bomb the Bible Belt, so why the fuck would I stand with Israel in their bombing of Palestine or Iran? Two things can be true at once. Islamism is a dangerous ideology, and so is Zionism. Gary portrays Israelis as peace-loving vegans and Palestinians as psychotic, hate-filled animal abusers. As if the majority of Israelis aren't meat eaters, and as if there are no Palestinian vegans. This is called essentialism, and it's the logic of the oppressor. Classifying an entire ethnicity as the problem, claiming they are the most psychotic group of people on the planet, and urging people to forget about those maniacs, is textbook racism. Some may argue that it's not racism because Palestinian is not a race, but this is a distinction without a difference. From Wikipedia, while the concepts of race and ethnicity are considered to be separate in contemporary social science, the two terms have a long history of equivalence in popular usage and older social science literature. Ethnicity is often used in a sense close to one traditionally attributed to race, the division of human groups based on qualities assumed to be essential or innate to the group, e.g., shared ancestry or shared behavior. Racism and racial discrimination are often used to describe discrimination on an ethnic or cultural basis, independent of whether these differences are described as racial. According to the United Nations Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, there is no distinction between the terms racial and ethnic discrimination. One could make the case that Zionism is a white supremacist ideology, as race plays a huge role in why people view Israelis in a positive light, and Palestinians in a negative light. But whatever you call it, what Gary is saying here is morally indistinguishable from the rhetoric of the KKK. Lastly, Gary is engaging in the oppression Olympics when he says Palestinians are living like kings and queens compared to cows, pigs, and chickens, and that animal rights is the only critical and important issue of our time. Which, by the way, is exactly what he condemns human rights activists for doing. He hates when human rights activists dismiss animal rights because they deem their cause more important. There is no hierarchy of oppressions. I'll come back to this later. Now, I want to play the segment of Jaime's podcast where they discuss human rights. Listen carefully for the racist dog whistle.
And frankly, just to stop trying to make people do things they don't want to do. I don't want to be a human rights activist. Accept that. Why should I have to do something I don't want to do? Or why should I have to have your opinion on something as long as I'm not causing harm? So keep in mind, my opinions don't cause harm. My actions cause harm. I'm not violent to human beings. I help out human beings. Individually, I love human beings. It's collectively, and understand what I'm saying. Collectively, I think humans are a scourge. Collectively, we destroy everything on this planet. Collectively, the earth would be better off if we weren't here. Now, it hurts me to say that. I don't think it has to be that way, but the way we operate, first and foremost, by enslaving and commodifying the entire animal kingdom, by committing genocide against the animal kingdom. You want to talk about a real genocide? Where's the dodo bird? Where's the pentaurus? Where's the black rhino at? We have literally wiped out species. That's a genocide against the animal kingdom. We destroy the air, the water, the forest. So this is my position on humans being a scourge.
Did you catch it?
You want to talk about a real genocide? Where's the dodo bird?
What could Gary have meant by his emphasis on real? He is referring to the genocide in Gaza, which he denies the existence of. The denial of a genocide that is fueled by racism is racist. Gary claims his opinions aren't harming anyone. That is only true if he kept them to himself, which he doesn't. Now, just because someone takes offense to your expressed opinion doesn't mean it was harmful. People may be offended by Gary's blunt animal rights messaging.
It's part of our circle of life.
No, this is the circle of
it's
torture
like
and death.
When you see a lion eating a zebra,
Okay.
and you're.
But I
you're
notice
saying,
you
okay,
have
this
clothes
is-
on. And I notice that you have a cell phone and you have a computer. It is unfair to pick one thing that lions do that you want to mimic when you don't want to mimic anything else they do. When lions walk up and greet each other, they sniff each other's ass. When I came in this room, you did not kneel down and sniff my ass. Okay? Lions sometimes kill their young when they're runts. Okay? If a human being killed their baby because they didn't want him, we arrest them and charge them with murder. Could you go to a courtroom and say, hey, but Your Honor, lions kill their babies, can't I? It's
But
an
it's their
unfair.
survivor.
It's an unfair comparison. You're not a lion.
And to that I would say, too bad, so sad, because he's right and you're wrong. But that doesn't mean that expressing one's opinion is never harmful. Words can be incredibly harmful, especially when you have a large platform like Gary does. By demonizing Palestinians as, quote, psychotic lunatics hell-bent on destroying Jews, Gary is engaging in stochastic terrorism. Hostile public speech towards a group statistically increases violence against that group, even when a direct link cannot be drawn.
I agree with you, and I think that it's a matter of when it comes to human rights, it's like there's not always some immediate change that we can do to help humans, whereas with animal rights, with veganism, it's like you can help animals 3 times a day by leaving them off your plate. So it's not an end-all be-all here, but let's start there. Let's start with peace on our plates, because that is the root of the problem. It's the root of all problems is devaluing the life of another being based on what they look like. The root of the problem is that some lives matter less. So if we can stop eating animals, then of course we can respect humans and be kind. And I mean, so that, like, you're offering people some type of logical, tactical approach of like, here are things that you could do today in your daily life. If I just make a post about a human rights issue, is that like actually creating an impact for that individual? Likelihood not, unless I get on a plane and I go somewhere and I provide aid, which I, absolutely am for that, but every single day of my life, 3 times a day, I can make a huge difference for the animals.
That is wonderfully said, Jaime. It's spot on. This is why I love veganism. It's something you can actually do instead of just paying lip service to all the issues on the planet. I used to tell people when the genocide in Darfur was happening, unless you go to the Sudan, your opinions don't mean anything over here. And of course it's sad. But since when does being sad make the world a better place? Today, I can choose not to eat cows and pigs and chickens and turkeys and fish and all the things that come out of these animals, and I can make a difference today. This is why I love veganism the most and animal rights the most. You can change your life and change the lives of animals right here and right now, instead of trying to get involved in issues that are happening elsewhere. And I say that as well about animal issues. I remember when I started in the 90s, people were really up in arms, and they should be, about the eating of dogs in some Asian nations. And they used to ask me, Gary, would you speak about this? And I'd say, no. What about the chickens right here in America that are being killed? 9 billion of them are being killed. So we need to focus on things in our area. Veganism is something that you can do every single day of your life, and you pointed it out 3 times a day. You can say, I'm not taking part in cruelty. I'm not causing unnecessary pain and suffering to anybody else anymore. And this is why this is the best movement on the planet, the most productive movement on the planet, and pretty much the only movement on the planet that you can practice, put into practice every single day of your life.
This idea that when it comes to animal rights, there is something we can put into practice every day. But when it comes to human rights, there isn't much we can do, apart from going to the Middle East or Africa and providing aid, shows a deep misunderstanding of these issues. I'm currently rereading The Divide by Jason Hickel, and he very succinctly outlines how these problems were created. Most humanitarian crises we see today are the result of the exploitation of the global South by the global North, driven by capitalism. Just as carnists are causing non-human animal suffering, privileged first world consumers are causing human suffering. Just as we have a responsibility to avoid products involving non-human animal exploitation, we have a responsibility to avoid products involving human exploitation, as far as possible and practicable, of course. This means opting for secondhand electronics, clothing, furniture, etc., wherever we can, boycotting fast fashion, and reducing air travel. We are morally obligated to limit our consumption to our fair share, which is measured by the One Planet metric. Currently, the average American's lifestyle requires 5 Earths to sustain. While I'm not opposed to aid, providing aid without addressing the underlying cause of the need for aid is not a long-term solution. Anti-capitalism is not just an ideology, it is something that can and should be put into practice. Regarding the genocide in Gaza, you can participate in the BDS movement, which stands for Boycott, Divest, and Sanction. To learn more, go to bdsmovement.net. If it sounds overwhelming, fear not. They have selected a few priority targets to increase the effectiveness of the boycott, as the longer the list of companies to boycott, the lower the participation. To avoid Israeli products at the grocery store, you can download the app No Thanks and simply scan the barcode. I was skeptical of BDS as a strategy at first because I saw it as a form of collective punishment of Israeli citizens. Funnily enough, the US Campaign for Palestinian Rights addresses this very argument on the FAQ page of their website. You can pause to read. Boycotting Israel is not a demonstration of prejudice against Israeli citizens, just as Canadians boycotting the US after Trump started a trade war is not a demonstration of prejudice against US citizens. As a US citizen, I support other countries imposing sanctions on us. Hell, I'd boycott the US if I could. I agree that it's more effective to focus on things in your own area. But if you live in the United States, this conflict is absolutely in your area, as your tax dollars are funding it. Speaking up is your responsibility as a US citizen. The only way Israel is going to end the genocide and occupation is through the removal of US support and pressure from the international community. Gary is making an appeal to futility when he calls support for Palestine anywhere outside of Israel lip service. Showing up at protests, donating to human rights organizations, making educational content, participating in BDS, and encouraging others to do the same is not lip service. But even if all you're doing is sharing pro-Palestine content on social media, your voice still matters. Don't let people silence you out of fear of being accused of slacktivism or virtue signaling or whatever.
And when it comes to animal rights, we need to focus on animal rights, because you'll notice if you go to a human rights protest, they don't talk about cows on dairy farms. They don't talk about baby pigs having their testicles ripped out. And do you know why? Because if they did, then they couldn't talk about gays in Uganda being killed and imprisoned. They couldn't talk about women being raped in Iraq because they're not wearing a headscarf. So follow the human rights movement, by the way. As much as I despise them, they're doing it right. They don't bring animal rights into it. And I'll tell you what, Jamie, I've been doing this now for 29 years. I'm tired of the abusive relationship that the animal rights movement has with the human rights movement. All they do is take from us, expect us to support them, but they never give it back. They never practice veganism. They never talk about the animal issues. In fact, I've said this before, but if you sat down people from every movement, from women's rights and black rights, and gay rights and trans rights, sat them down at a table with an animal rights person, they'd be allowed to have cowskin shoes. If the discussion went on long enough, they could actually bring a hamburger or some chicken wings to it, and it would be allowed. They'd say, hey, Gary, hey, Jamie, come on, don't force it on everybody. But if we stood up and said, well, you know what? We don't think gay people should have the right to be married, they'd kick us out. If we said, you know, women don't deserve the same pay as men in this job, they'd say, Gary, get the hell out of here. If we said black people don't deserve the same job opportunities as white, they'd force us to leave. But all of a sudden, they can violate animals at every turn, and it's like, hey, come on, ease up on us. It's our habit. This is the way we were brought up. That's why animals were here. In fact, the human rights people use the same dumb excuses that everybody else uses. Where am I going to get my protein? God says it's okay. That's why animals are here. Oh, they're stupid. They don't even feel pain. I mean, all the nonsense, they're using it. So I got to tell you, after all these years, I believe that human rights is the number one impediment to the advancement of animal rights. And this is why I'm taking this position now. This is how much I care about the most abused, most oppressed beings on this planet. I want them first. And basically, I'll break it down even further. What human rights people are saying is, let's get to the humans first, then we'll get to the animals. Well, I say, screw you. Let's get to the animals first, and then we'll get to the humans after. Why does it have to be the other way around? I'm tired of it, especially as you pointed out, the root of all evil is speciesism. All the other branches of evil, racism, sexism, heterosexism, stems from speciesism, the first form of hatred that human beings are taught. So get rid of speciesism. Teach a kid to be nice to a chicken, a mouse, and a spider. How in the hell are they going to look to their fellow humans who are different sizes, shapes, and colors? How would they look at them in anger and hatred? This is where peace starts. And I believe Pythagoras, 2,600 years ago, had a statement about that the root of all evil is what we do to animals.
Yeah. I mean, look, we're not telling other people don't advocate for whatever cause you want to advocate for, but for somebody to come to you and say, you need to talk about these things when there are so many trillions, billions of animals that are suffering, that are in cages, that are being violently killed. It's like, how dare you say that? This is a big enough issue as is. And in terms of scale, it is the most pressing. In terms of scale, in terms of the time that it's been going on for, and in terms of its increasing numbers of what is happening to the animals, this is a massacre. This is a genocide.
Think about this too. We learned how to oppress and murder and enslave human beings because we practiced on the animals first. Again, the root of all of our violence and hatred stems from what we've done to the animals. That's why Nazis were so good at rounding up Jews. That's why white people in America were so good at rounding up blacks and enslaving them and using horrible psychological tactics of rape to distress, you know, the majority of all these slaves, baby stealing and things like that. So it is the root. We've practiced on the animals, and we became experts at oppressing human beings. So this is what we need to focus on. And just like you said, go ahead. You want to do your stuff? Fine. Do it at the human rights protest. When we're protesting the circus, the rodeo, the fur industry, McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, meat, dairy, and eggs, we focus on the animals, and I don't think that's asking too much. How is this an unreasonable request? It's an animal rights protest. Let's focus on the animals only. You want to focus on gay rights later? Fine. Go to the gay rights protest, go to the pride protest, and go do that. In fact, in Budapest, I think last week, there was 100,000 people went out to the pride event. How many signs do you think that they were holding that said, free chickens, stop harming pigs? None. because they're doing it right. This is all about gay people obtaining their freedom and their equal rights. And something else that bothers me, I'll just close it with this too, maybe. Listen, when human rights people demand life, liberty, and happiness, but refuse to give it out to the cows and pigs and chickens, I say clearly and loudly, you're a hypocrite, and I am not going to support you anymore until you become aligned with your so-called ethical values of life, liberty, and happiness.
Bare minimum is being vegan, and then you can speak up for whatever the hell you want. But it is very tricky, and it's like we have so many people fighting for the humans and so little people fighting for the animals. The animals can't lose us. they can't. I mean, we are their hope.
Since Gary has come back on the scene, he's been making the rounds, doing interview after interview, and he will not shut the fuck up about how human rights is the greatest impediment to the animal rights movement, and vegans need to focus on the animals. If you don't want to talk about human rights, stop talking about human rights. Same goes for George Martin and Vegan Gains. They insist that intersectional vegans stop bringing politics into the vegan movement, yet constantly bring up politics themselves. They are not shy about making their anti-woke Zionist views known.
I don't care how many fucking innocent civilians end up dying in fucking Gaza for people to fucking learn that they can't fuck with Israel, okay? I don't care if the civilian casualties go up to 100,000. Those people can learn the hard way if they need to.
So in this hypothetical, all of Earth's population is the same, but there's like just 1 trillion civilians in Gaza, and they get killed as a result of this war.
So you're telling me as a result of the war, every single Gazan civilian dies, and it's 1 trillion?
In this hypothetical, yes.
If that's what's required for Israel to maintain its military objectives, then go for it.
Wow, okay.
The latest lie being spread about me is that I am a racist because in a calm and sober assessment of the Israeli-Palestinian situation, I said that Palestinians are the most psychotic group of people on the planet. I stand by that statement.
It's a bit ironic to complain about intersectional vegans causing division and infighting, while saying the most divisive and inflammatory things. Jaime seems shocked by the backlash she's gotten, but she chose to position human rights as the biggest threat to the animal rights movement. Like, girl, did you not think that would cause division? This claim is absurd on its face, but Natalie's community post perfectly illustrates just how insane it is. A few people in the animal rights movement are peddling the idea that human rights is the greatest impediment to animal rights. To me, it seems pretty clear that the biggest impediment to animal rights is the industries that exploit animals. I acknowledge that some intersectional vegans demand that Jaime and other animal rights activists speak about BLM or Palestine specifically. And I understand why it's frustrating to be told what to do with your platform when you already use your platform for good. I have maintained on this channel that while I choose to talk about other issues and see them as integrated and overlapping, I see the value in having some activists exclusively focused on animal rights. If every vegan activist was a loud and proud leftist with a hammer and sickle, Palestinian flag, and pronouns in their bio, who would appeal to the normies? Also, demanding activists speak about a specific issue sets an impossible standard. Because as horrific as the genocide in Gaza is, and policing in the United States, there are many other important issues that deserve attention, and we simply cannot speak on or stay informed about all of them. Many of my intersectional vegan friends share this view. We don't have a problem with Earthling Ed or Danny Ishe or Jamie Logan not talking about other issues. We have a problem with people like Gary and George and Richard spewing insane right-wing nonsense while simultaneously screeching about how we should focus on the animals. Intersectionality is more about not tolerating bigotry of any kind in our movement than it is about making activists divide their time and attention to every cause. George Martin, one of Gary's most fervent defenders, insists that animal rights is the only social justice movement that intersectionality is applied to. This is not true at all. Study any successful social justice movement, and you'll find that coalition building with other social justice organizations was critical to their success. I worked for Greenpeace for several years and canvassed for Amnesty International for a brief period. Intersectionality is heavily pushed in these organizations. Walk into any social justice space, and you are expected to be an anti-racist, feminist, queer ally. Sadly, they're behind when it comes to animal rights, but this isn't a matter of intersectionality not applying. It's a matter of non-human animals not being included yet. We need to convince human rights activists to include non-human animals in their analysis. We shouldn't throw out intersectionality. We should push for an upgrade from humanism to sentientism. George refers to the supposed double standard that intersectional vegans hold as Gary derangement syndrome, a play on Trump derangement syndrome. If you're not familiar with TDS, it originated as a pejorative term used by Trump supporters to describe negative reactions to Donald Trump that are characterized as irrational and disconnected from Trump's actual policy positions. As if Trump's critics are the ones suffering from derangement. If anyone should be said to have Trump derangement syndrome, it's his supporters. Anyway, George asks, what has Gary said that is worse than what people in other movements have done? Then he gives examples of various people intersectional vegans supposedly lionize, many of whom are imperfect victims like George Floyd. George is misrepresenting intersectional veganism in assuming the intersectional response to each of these offenses is total silence or hero worship. I can't speak for all intersectional vegans, but I can speak for myself and many other intersectional vegans. We do not hero worship these people. We understand that people can be both victims and victimizers. We don't reserve all of our criticism for vegan activists. We criticize human rights activists all the time for being misogynistic, materialistic, transphobic, racist, and even speciesist. It's true that we tend to be a bit softer in calling out speciesism, but this is because of where we are on the adoption curve when it comes to animal rights. I recognize that some intersectional vegans are too soft on carnus. They're quick to condemn animal rights activists for covert racism, sexism, homophobia, etc., but give leniency to human rights activists for overt speciesism. Harshly condemning Jaime for platforming Gary while saying nothing to human rights activists who eat meat and call cops pigs is unfair. However, I don't see a double standard in denouncing Gary Yourofsky while not denouncing your average non-vegan human rights activist. Unlike Jaime, Gary has exhibited overt racism in his comments about Palestinians. For this, he has lost my respect. So why do I still respect so many carnist human rights activists? To judge someone's character, we have to consider the context. Social norms play a huge role in people's moral decision-making. Most people will follow the herd. So when something immoral is socially accepted, going against the grain demonstrates moral fortitude. And when something immoral is socially unacceptable, going against the grain demonstrates a moral deficiency. In today's society, eating meat is extremely normalized. Vegans represent less than 5% of the global population. Racism, though still a problem, is much less socially acceptable than speciesism. Whether a person eats animals says less about their character than whether they support bombing and starving children. Both are on the wrong side of history, but when we think in terms of the adoption curve, current-day vegans are considered innovators, while people who are pro-Palestine are either in the early or late majority stage. Given that vegans are early adopters when it comes to animal rights, you would expect them to be less susceptible to Zionist propaganda. Most vegans lean left on the political spectrum, for a reason. So supporting Israel is even less socially acceptable within the vegan movement than it is among the general population. Put in this context, non-vegan human rights activists are simply not innovators when it comes to animal rights, while racist vegans are laggards when it comes to human rights. History judges laggards the harshest, which is why I'm more tolerant of flesh-eating human rights activists than I am of racist vegans. George is defending Gary as if he has been cancelled for expressing a mere difference of opinion. But Gary is not a confused centrist on the issue of Israel-Palestine. He is positively unhinged and seething with racist hatred. Analogous behavior would be a high-profile human rights activist posting a deranged rant about how animals don't matter and vegans are the biggest threat to progressive movements. While human rights activists are often dismissive of animal rights, and intersectional vegans are often tolerant of them, this degree of vitriol would absolutely not be tolerated. If Zoran Mamdani or some other esteemed socialist movement leader said some shit like that, they would be dead to me. So no, George, I do not have Gary derangement syndrome. You have Gary derangement syndrome. Just as Trump derangement syndrome better describes support of Trump, Gary derangement syndrome better describes the hero worship of Gary Yourofsky. Speaking of racist vegans, let's talk about this idea that speciesism is the root of all evil, and if we simply teach kids to be kind to animals, they won't grow up to be racist, sexist, or homophobic. On the surface, this makes sense. However, Gary, George, and Richard are living proof that this is not true. Sadly, most people do not apply their values consistently. And that is why I think the consistent anti-oppression messaging is important. It gets people to apply their values consistently. While the focus on the animals approach is valuable and necessary to attract normies, moderates, and conservatives to veganism, it should serve as a gateway to total liberation. The total liberation approach is valuable and necessary to get people to think even deeper. The root of all evil is not speciesism, it's discrimination based on arbitrary characteristics. As Colleen Patrick Goudreau says, veganism is a means to an end, a more compassionate world, not an end in itself. Total liberation is the destination. Jaime says,
I mean, look, we're not telling other people don't advocate for whatever cause you want to advocate for.
I understand that you are not saying this, Jaime, but Gary is speaking out of both sides of his mouth. He says,
Go ahead, you want to do your stuff? Fine. Do it at the human rights protest.
But then goes on to say,
Screw you. Let's get to the animals first, and then we'll get to the humans after.
In his Facebook post, he said that animal rights is the only critical and important issue of our time. And in his conversation with Vegan Gains, he said this.
Gary, do you think every vegan should make animal activism their primary cause they advocate for, or is it okay for vegans to care about other issues more than animal rights?
No other issues. It's animals. Again, forget about the human being, the scourge of the earth. Stop putting humans on a pedestal. Animals first, humans later.
In terms of scale, animal rights is the most pressing issue of our time. We kill an estimated 1.2 trillion animals every year. Apart from the incomprehensible suffering of these animals, which is bad enough, the consequences of farming animals are far-reaching. There are ecological concerns like greenhouse gas emissions, deforestation, water pollution, and resource waste, as well as public health concerns like cancer, heart disease, pandemics, and antibiotic resistance. However, the experience of a child suffocating under the rubble in Gaza or starving to death is just as dire to that individual as the experience of a factory-farmed animal. And to those experiencing less harsh forms of oppression, like backyard chickens exploited for their eggs, and marginalized people dealing with microaggressions, your suffering matters, even though it could be worse. When I hear the quote, "there is no hierarchy of oppression," my interpretation is not, all experiences of oppression are equally bad, but all experiences of oppression matter, and someone's experience of oppression should not be dismissed and turned into a competition of who has it worse. How would you feel if every time you complained to your partner about some frustrating experience you were having, they told you, "Stop complaining, there are bigger problems in the world"? Imagine how someone who cares deeply about Palestinian or LGBT rights feels when they hear a vegan say the animals have it worse, and the animal rights cause is more important. Do you think they're inclined to consider what they have to say or tune them out? Gary says,
What human rights people are saying is, let's get to the humans first, then we'll get to the animals. Well, I say, screw you. Let's get to the animals first, and then we'll get to the humans after.
This is a false dichotomy. There is a third and much more enlightened way. You keep your focus on human rights, I'll keep my focus on animal rights, and we can support each other in our efforts. Animal rights activists should support human rights causes because, for one, it's the right thing to do, logically and morally. Humans are animals. Animal rights are human rights. And 2, it's strategic. Human rights advocates may not show support in return, at least not right away. But who is going to have a better chance convincing a human rights advocate to respect animals? The person who supports their cause? Or the person who says, fuck you? This is especially important if you're gonna bring up things like slavery, rape, and the Holocaust to make a point about animal rights. I am not opposed to using this rhetoric, but you better be fucking consistently anti-oppression, otherwise you'll lose the people whose support we would benefit from the most. Anyway, before you say, Gary is one of the most effective activists of our time, how can you criticize him and claim your way is more strategic when you only have 7,000 subscribers on YouTube? What have you done? Consider that. 1, you're engaging in hero worship. Nobody is above criticism. 2, doing good work doesn't grant you permission to oppress others. We all rolled our eyes when Miley Cyrus went on Joe Rogan's podcast and announced she was no longer vegan, and tried to absolve herself by claiming she does her part for the animals since she has a bunch of rescue animals. 3, saying I turned out fine is not a justification for spanking children, because you likely turned out fine despite being spanked, not because you were spanked. Gary's success very likely came in spite of his problematic comments about humans. How many more people could he have inspired to go vegan with the same blunt approach, minus the problematic comments about humans? 4, I don't recall Gary saying fuck human rights or calling Palestinians psychotic lunatics in his Georgia Tech speech. And 5, even if throwing marginalized people under the bus were effective in advancing some positive goal, it's still an unethical thing to do. Lastly, I want to share a clip from George Martin's interview with Gary that I think demonstrates just how deranged this man is.
So I'm in California. I'm doing a lecture. I'm on the second floor. It's part of the story I have to tell you. So some kid brings up God says it's okay to kill animals, one of the dumbest comments. So I became an expert in the Bible over the years, had to talk to so many people. So I completely annihilated his argument. And at the end of the Q&A, he says to me, what'd you bring up God for anyways? I said, asshole, you asked me about it. You're the one that brought it up. And I had a Bible in my hand and actually threw it at him. And I just missed his head. It went right over his head. And I said, class is dismissed. Everybody get the hell out of here. So I walk outside in the hallway. I'm fuming, I'm steaming. And Erica, my ex-wife, was there with me. So Erica's in the hallway. She's trying to calm me down. The student starts posturing me walking down the hallway with his chest out. Not a good idea to do to me. She knows me, obviously, as well as anybody. It says, not to me. She says to the guy, sir, don't do that. You don't know what's about to happen. Please stop. He comes back a second time to posture me. I cannot believe the audacity and the balls on this guy to do this. She says again, she pleads, sir, do not do this to him. You don't understand what's about to happen. He comes back a third time. I grab him by the neck. I hang him over the balcony. I said, I'm going to throw you off the balcony. I'm going to show you what it's like to be an animal. You want to get treated like a cow? I'll treat you like a chicken. So Erica's grabbing me around the neck. Gary, don't throw him off the balcony. I'm going to throw you off the balcony. The kid's freaking out. She finally pulls me off the kid. The kid runs away. So I got to go tell the professor what happened, of course. So I walked back to the class and I said, hey, Alan, you know that kid that brought up the Bible and God? He goes, yeah. I said, well, he was posturing me in the hallway and I grabbed him by the neck. I was going to throw him off the second floor balcony. He says, Gary, you got to stop doing lectures on the second floor. So, and then he says, by the way, that kid's a jerk. I can't say anything to him because I'm the professor. Thank you for doing that to him. So what was funny was the people that I got into a quarrel with, surprise, surprise, they were the troublemakers. They were the jerks. They were the dickheads always. And the professors always thank me for yelling at them, saying the same thing. I'm the professor. I can't say anything. Thanks for doing that. But at that time, I knew my fuse was way too short. And I didn't want to throw a smart aleck off a second floor balcony. He was just being a jerk. That's not what I'm talking about. I know people have read my essays or heard my comments about supporting violence. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about busting into a slaughterhouse with guns drawn and pulling guns on the people with knives committing acts of cruelty, going, you drop your weapons. That would be justified in my eyes. Busting into a vivisection lab, say, you guys stop torturing these monkeys and these rats. You are the violent perpetrators. And if I have to use violence to stop you, then I'll stop you. It's not about throwing a smart aleck off a second floor balcony, and it's not about blowing up a McDonald's, which I would not support. Those are robots that are in there. Those are the people that I want to teach, I want to educate, want to deprogram, want to unbrainwash. So a lot of people misunderstood a lot of my comments over the years, and maybe today, and hopefully over the next who knows how long, I'll be able to explain my positions a little more so people can understand where I'm coming from. But again, be in the movement in the trenches as long as I have, and you'll see that your temper is a little short after a while, and maybe you're not so calm.
The fact that George laughs along as if this is a normal sign of activist burnout, rather than a fucking insane display of toxic masculinity, says it all. I hope Jaime and others now see why Gary Yourofsky is not someone we should look up to. Thank you so much for watching. This was probably the longest video I've ever made, so if you made it to the end, comment down below. You're a real one. Alright, peace out.